you can't heal in a state of threat always. It naturally creates inflammation. If your nervous system is always bracing for that impact, your body can't prioritize that repair, digestion, or even balance. Throws your thyroid, your hormones all out of balance. It's survival first, healing last.
Welcome to Health Decoded, your number one source for real health information, with your hosts, Dr. Alessi and Matt Tack.
Welcome back to another episode of Health Decoded. I am your host, Dr. Alessi.
And your co-host, Matt Tack.
Matt Tack, good to see you, my guy.
Good to see you, man. How you doing?
Not that I don't see you every day, but just, in a little different facet here. Well, man, I'm excited for this one. This is something that I know you're a very big proponent of and something that you coach on a lot. So pumped about this topic today. And what that topic is the vagus nerve and why really vagal tone is responsible for maintaining like a level of like calm and balance within the body, and why resetting that is also, important for resetting our nervous system, immune system, and all these different systems within the body. So, let's just get right into it. I think we'll start for most patients or most people, like talking about what is a vagus nerve. A lot of people don't even know what it is. So let's just start there. So, what is something a lot of people don't even learn, but the vagus nerve is really the most important nerve in your body. And it's your cranial nerve 10. So it starts basically at the base of your brainstem. And so it's the longest cranial nerve in your body. It originates at the medulla oblongata, which is in your brainstem, and it travels downward through the neck into the chest and abdomen, which then branches out to major organs, including your heart, lungs, liver, spleen, kidneys, and your entire digestive tract. And so, the word vagus comes from the Latin word wandering, because it literally wanders throughout the body. There's a kind of a cool statistic there, but it's basically the powerhouse of your parasympathetic nervous system. And so your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, meaning the one that's just always running, it's not something we can control, has two parts. Your sympathetic, which is what we know as like the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, which is more of that rest, digest, and repair system. And so, whereas the sympathetic nervous system is preparing our body for stress or for, some type of emergency, the parasympathetic is doing the opposite. And so the vagus nerve is able to bring it back down to calm when times of healing and recovery. And so if your vagus nerve isn't working properly, or if we're stuck in a sympathetic state, which is like chronic stress mode, we've talked about this before, this is where we see breakdown of systems, rise of inflammation, and ultimately dysfunction and disease. And so, the core functions of the vagus nerve, basically what it does is it's multitasking. It's doing a lot of different things in regulation. So it's going to help regulate heart rate and blood pressure. It's going to regulate digestive function, because it actually stimulates stomach acid production and enzyme release. So anytime we're working with patients who maybe are having digestive issues and they've been prescribed things like Nexiums and proton pump inhibitors, I'm also like, hey, yeah, let's focus on the digestive part, but how do we balance that central nervous system as well? Because it's very critical. It's also important for immune regulation and inflammation control. Basically like the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway is stimulated by the vagal nerve. And so this helps to produce certain things that are going to fight against, infections and invaders. And then it's also important for mood, focus, and cognitive health as well. It can help against things like anxiety and depression if we can have, proper vagal tone. So then, we always like to talk about like what can you experience, right? Like when vagal tone is low, basically meaning your vagus nerve is not functioning well. So you could feel things like chronic fatigue or burnout, bloating, constipation, brain fog, or poor concentration. Again, anxiety, depression, poor sleep quality. People often get like low HRV, which is that heart rate variability, and then even like autoimmune or inflammatory flare-ups. Now, everything on that list we've discussed in detail for specific things in the past. So that's why addressing vagal tone is basically incorporated into all of our functional medicine and, total care kind of like programs where we're like, hey, we're addressing an internal system, but we need to focus on this as well because it's going to, it's going to make or break whether or not this works. And so when the vagus tone is low, the body is going to be stuck in fight or flight, and then healing and recovery is ultimately not possible. So things that are going to disrupt the vagal tone, right, or vagus nerve is high stress, trauma, whether that's physical or, psychological trauma, poor gut health. So things like leaky gut, which we deal with all the time. Pretty much everybody comes in with gut issues. I'm testing leaky gut, and more often than not, we're finding it. Just the amount of like stress and toxins our bodies go through. Things like mouth breathing, right? This is a little bit more kind of nuanced, but if we're breathing through our mouth, we are not activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So focusing on like breathing in through the nose and diaphragmatically, right? Using our stomach, not our chest. And then another one that we deal with a lot in the clinic is cervical spine dysfunction or even TMJ dysfunction. And so when there's structural misalignments in the cervical spine, that can put pressure on the vagus nerve and obviously lower that vagal tone. So there's actually a cool study, 2018 in Frontiers of Neuroscience, reviewed the effects of vagus nerve stimulation and found that there was some compelling evidence to improve vagal tone. It reduced inflammation, improved symptoms of autoimmune disease, supported mood, and then enhanced digestive and metabolic health in patients. So that's pretty awesome. Something as simple as, doing some, what we're going to talk about, like breath work, cold exposure, all of that to stimulate vagal tone had these profound effects. So kind of like, in takeaway here, like what we always talk about is like things don't work in isolation, right? Thyroid doesn't work in isolation. Gut doesn't work in isolation. The vagus nerve is often kind of that missing link. Remember, it's spread out so much. And so it connects the brain, body, and immune system. And so when we're talking about true healing, this has to be a component or a piece of what we're doing. So now, why don't you, Matt, talk a little bit about like kind of signs, right? Like let's get a little bit more into it, like that maybe someone's stuck in the fight or flight mode and what people can experience with that.
Yeah, let's break that down. So the vagus nerve is why it's critical. And let's, shift gears here a little bit and talk about something that affects more people than we actually realize. So most people are living in survival mode and don't even know it, right? I think Dr. Alessi says this over and over again. There's nothing new underneath the sun. And so when we come back to it, we're talking about sympathetic dominance and where body is stuck in fight or flight long after the danger is gone. And that's when the body tenses up, right? The central nervous system is tense and you just feel rigid, right? This isn't just a feeling, it's a psychological state that directly impacts your brain, hormones, your digestion, inflammation, and let's be real, your overall quality of life. So as we go into the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system is designed to respond to acute threats, right? So like running from a predator or swerving around to avoid a crash. It increases your heart rate, pumps your blood to your muscles, and releases adrenaline and cortisol to help you survive. We do this intentionally a lot as an example of hopping into a cold plunge, right? That's your sympathetic nervous system arising. But here's the problem when it's unintentional, right? When you're constantly going through these states of chronic stress, means that the response never shuts off. So you're constantly in that state. So most of us are being hit with these micro threats all day long, right? Deadlines, traffic, phone, notifications, blood sugar levels, emotional pressure, past trauma, poor sleep, toxins, all of which your brain is staying on this high alert. So when is it in overdrive, right? These are the symptoms of dysregulated nervous systems that we see all the time in our practice at Alessi Functional Health. And we're going to get later into, all right, what do we need to do to bring in the parasympathetic, right? So sleep issues, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, major concern, right? Anxiety or irritability throughout the day, that happens, right? A lot of us, I recently a book that I'm currently reading, and I forget the name of the author, but it's the anxious society that we live in, right? So it's more so adolescence, but right, the anxious society that like the social spheres and past trauma automatically give us, right? Digestive problem, cold hands and feet, that neuropathy, brain fog or memory lapses. Now we're not talking about, hey, I lost my keys, or hey, I just forgot what I was doing 10 minutes ago. It's one of those things where it's the consistent nature of, can you recall things, right? Can you recall what you did this past weekend or what you did previous weekends? So those are some of the things that you really want to make sure, like, hey, is this just a common occurrence, or is this happening consistently, right? Muscle tension, racing hearts, your racing heartbeat or palpitations, fatigue that just doesn't go away, right? So you're wired but tired at the same time. Your nervous system can't just shift into a downshift. And then you just have a low stress tolerance. Even small issues seem just super overwhelming to you. And if you feel like you're always bracing for impact, you're always stepping on the brakes, your nervous system probably thinks that danger is real, even when it's not. So how do we create something that we can, step off the gas, right? And maybe even sometimes put on a little bit gas, where we know when to shift from that braking mechanism to put on the gas. So you can have the perfect supplement stack. You can eat organic. You can even meditate once a week. But if your nervous system is dysregulated, none of it works the way it should, right? You want it all in sequence. This is why this is the silent bottleneck healing. You can't out supplement a nervous system that thinks it's in danger zone 24/7. So here's what science says. A landmark 2020 review in the neuroendocrinology analyzed how vagal suppression, get that, vagal suppression, right? So your poor vagus nerve tone has effects on long-term health. So they found that chronic low vagal tone, meaning a suppressed or overstressed vagal nerve, increased cortisol levels. So you constantly have high cortisol levels. You want to have, and so diving into that, what cortisol is actually level, there's a cadence to which your cortisol levels ebbs and flow, right? It should peak right after that morning wake up. It's slowly rising, right? It should peak mid-morning to afternoon and slowly make its way down where you're catering it towards bedtime, right? That's the way that's what we look at when we take your blood work, right? Is, hey, do you have proper cortisol cadence? Leads to insulin resistance, which is that blood sugar instability, right? That usually comes out of poor sleep and high cortisol levels, and promotes immune dysregulation, meaning maybe you get a lot of colds throughout the year. You get sick more often than not, right? Every time the weather changes or something like that, right? Making inflammation harder to control. So this creates a perfect storm effect for chronic disease, especially autoimmune issues, cardiovascular problems, and neurodegenerative decline. So if you're wondering why your fatigue won't lift, your gut won't heal, your anxiety won't ease up, and you have to look upstream. You got to look at your nervous system. So here's what I want you to leave you with, right? You can't heal in a state of threat always. It naturally creates inflammation. If your nervous system is always bracing for that impact, your body can't prioritize that repair, digestion, or even balance, right? It throws your thyroid, your hormones all out of balance. So survival first, healing last. That's why we always say nervous system first, right? Fixate your nervous system, whether through breathing mechanisms or other focused efforts. I personally choose, a cold plunge therapy with a sauna. I love the contrast therapy. Fix that, but those are intentional ways to do it. So fix that foundation and everything else then becomes possible, right? We had a group outing last week. And that's one of the things we talked about, was how we're intentional about how we operate within our nervous system. So those are some of the things that you just want to be cognizant of, and even speaking to yourself, right? Speaking in ways that are positive, elevate and de-escalate scenarios where you can have that vagal toning, that proper vagal toning. So now in our next segment, so let's get into how we can improve that vagus tone with practice over time. But before we do that, here's a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode of Health Decoded is brought to you by Authentic Nutrition, the brand redefining what it means to fuel your body the right way. At Authentic Nutrition, they believe that what you put into your body matters. That's why every single product is crafted with clean, premium ingredients and dosed with maximum efficacy to ensure you're not just meeting your health goals, you're exceeding them. No fillers, no shortcuts, no gimmicks. Whether it's their advanced supplements for energy, recovery, or gut health, you can trust that what's on the label is exactly what's in the bottle. Authentic Nutrition delivers science-backed formulations that work as hard as you do. If you're tired of products that promise the world but don't deliver, it's time to make the switch to Authentic Nutrition. Elevate your health with transparency, quality, and results you can feel. Check them out today at AuthenticNutrition.com and use promo code Alessi15 to get 15% off. That's THENTIC Nutrition.com, promo code ALESSI15 to save 15% and take the first step toward real, lasting health. Authentic Nutrition. Fuel your best self. Now back to the episode.
Awesome. Welcome back. Man, that was really good stuff. Things that people deal with all the time. And like most people are like brushing off. They're like, yeah, I just feel tired. Like I'm stressed all the time. It's like that is going to eventually lead to issues. And we see it all the time. People brush things off. Then they end up in the clinic and they're like, okay, now we're repairing it. So, by improving your vagal tone and resetting the nervous system, you get ahead of a lot of these issues before they become issues. So, say we're in a state of chronic stress and fight or flight, and we want to reset the vagal tone. This is how we do it. Let's talk about some of these solutions. And obviously, you just explained kind of what it feels like to be stuck in that sympathetic overdrive. And so, if somebody listening right now is experiencing that or has experienced that or knows somebody, then, pay attention, because these are some things you can do, some action items to be able to kind of reverse that. So basically, your nervous system is plastic. The term we use, plastic, meaning it can rewire, it can rebalance, it can heal. You just have to give it the right input. So again, vagal tone, we kept saying that. It's basically a measure of how well your vagus nerve is functioning, the ability for your body to switch from sympathetic into parasympathetic. That is essentially the tone, right? And so that's where those things like cold plunge that you talk about is because, you're spiking your sympathetic real quick with that, oh my gosh, kind of things are freezing, right? But then when you get out, how quickly can you reset that with some breath work? So it's a very strong practice. It's almost like resilience practice, if you will. So, higher vagal tone, you're going to have faster recovery, better digestion, stronger immune balance, and you'll be more resilient, better energy. If you have lower vagal tone, you're going to be honestly chronically stressing your physiology, poor recovery, inflamed, probably mood swings, and then digestive dysfunction, obviously. So let's talk about some things, and I've got a list here, and I'll go through them, and if you want to add anything, man, obviously jump in. But number one, the best thing you can do, and this is free, is breath work. So what we call diaphragmatic breathing. So basically like slow, deep belly breathing, drawing in through the nose, expanding like your stomach versus like your rib cage or your chest. You want to breathe with your diaphragm. And so this is one of the fastest ways to activate the vagus nerve. A couple of methods. One is called a 4-7-8. So basically it's a 4-second inhale, a 7-second hold, and then an 8-second exhale. And so when you have a longer exhale, you're actually like saturating your blood with carbon dioxide. It's going to build up, and that can kind of put you into that parasympathetic. And then box breathing is a great one too. Basically, inhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds. And people are always like, well, does it have to be 4 seconds? If it's 5 seconds, it's not the end of the world, right? Like I say, the concept is to have a cadence and control. You're controlling your breathing. So how often are we going through our day thinking about our breathing? We're not. We're kind of just like automatically doing stuff, and we're going to breathe in kind of like a dysregulated way. And so there's a study in Frontiers in Psychology found that slow-paced breathing actually significantly increased the vagal activity and heart rate variability, which HRV is a key measure for recovery and how our nervous system is functioning.
The next one, and this is something, I mean, this is your thing, man, cold exposure. You're the cold guy. So like cold showers, cold plunges, or even like you see a lot of people nowadays just doing like stimulating that diving reflex by putting their face in cold water, right? It's the same concept. It's stimulating a bit of sympathetic to then get you back into the parasympathetic. And so there was a 2020 study that showed cold exposure directly increases parasympathetic activity, improves mood by triggering these vagal pathways. And we all know you get out of cold and it's like, okay, in the moment it sucked, but you get out of there and you've got like this heightened energy. You feel like you're on caffeine or something. And that's directly kind of that response that we're talking about. Another one, gargling or singing or humming, right? These things can stimulate the vagus tone because, again, the vagus nerve runs down the back of the throat. And so when we're doing these things, we are stimulating that nerve in a way. Jake, who is our, a massage therapist, works at our clinic, does the Electrons Plus, and he'll get his fingers right on the vagus nerve and he'll put it on there. And it feels funky because he's, directly stimulating it, but you definitely feel afterwards like this calming effect. So that's a pretty cool one as well. And then something we do in our clinic, obviously chiropractic, spinal alignments. So especially like the upper cervical, C1, C2, because your brainstem, the lower part, the medulla lives in there. It's right inside that C1, which is your atlas. Basically, the atlas is like a little ring around that brainstem. And when there's even, a millimeter to 2 millimeters of misalignment, it will cause pressure, which will then downregulate that vagus nerve. Focusing on like gut repair, right? So fixing the gut, because the gut and the brain are connected. We say all the time that the gut is a second brain. Honestly, it's probably the first brain. It has more nervous activity than really, going on. And so, about 80 to 90% of the vagus nerve fibers go from the gut to the brain. And so, gut inflammation, leaky gut, dysbiosis, these are going to directly influence vagal tone. So, we recommend things like probiotics, collagen, glutamine, anti-inflammatory diet, but you can't just start taking a bunch of stuff. You obviously have to have a plan, right? If you have some type of dysfunction, you don't just start throwing things onto it. You could make the problem worse. So obviously getting some testing done is important. Other things are like movement and lymphatic flow. So, bouncing on like a mini trampoline or rebounder, dry brushing, or the vibration power plates we have in the office, stimulate that autonomic nervous system. HRV training and biofeedback. So, using these tools or like these feedback mechanisms, the Whoop band or the Aura ring, telling you, or like even like my Garmin watch gives me like an HRV score, right? And so I can kind of tell when I'm like pushing it because it'll be lower. And I'm like, okay, I need to maybe dial back or like focus a little bit more on some of these things we're talking about. And so, we definitely focus in our clinic when we have a patient going through a protocol is like, again, the whole picture approach. And so the nervous system reset is really important. We're often going to integrate like a combination of things, the chiropractic biophysics, breathwork training, using adaptogenic herbs and nutraceuticals, and then even like cool like peptides and stuff, like Selank and Semax. These are ones that they're intranasal sprays that help to kind of stimulate the vagal tone or downregulate it. And then obviously, we already know like functional lab testing to identify, is the stress coming from infections, blood sugar imbalances, toxins, right? Or is it more emotional, like daily stress? Because if we understand, I always say this to patients, I'm like, if we understand why, like, then we know what we can do to fix it, right? And so again, you're not going to out meditate your way out of a toxic like thing, like if you have overloaded toxins. And you're not going to detox your way out of like chronic stress from work, right? So it's like there needs to be a multi-pronged approach. So, I think in overall, right, the vagus nerve we talked about is basically like it's pivotal for so many different things, and that's why we incorporate it into pretty much everything we do.
Yeah, the nervous system is at the end of the day is like the foundation for healing. So as everything you aforementioned, let's go ahead and land the plane here. We talked about the vagus nerve and how the dysfunction shows up and how to improve tone and reset the system. But It's time to zoom out a little bit, because this isn't just about like relaxation and meditation. It's about why the nervous system regulation is the foundation for all of healing throughout the entire body. So here we break down the healing hierarchy, and here's the truth, right? You can't out heal your hormones if your body thinks it's being chased by a frigging tiger every day. Right?
Yeah.
You can't digest food if you're in fight or flight constantly, and you definitely can't recover from chronic illness if your nervous system is locked in survival mode. So get that. Why is everyone pre-diabetic? Why is everyone potentially getting cancer, right? And we do blame it on food a lot of times of what we put in, and food has to do a lot with it, but it's also the chronic stress that is impacting our central nervous system, where we are constantly in fight or flight. So our body is naturally going to inflamed, regardless of the food that we put in, regardless of the supplementation, right? You have to get to the point where your body is willing to accept it, right? The healthy food that you're putting into your body, the healthy supplementation. And you're not going to do that unless you're educated and trained, which is why we do this, right? So that's why at Alessi Functional Health, the nervous system regulation isn't a bonus. It's built in every part of our care model, right? So physical medicine, functional medicine, and regenerative medicine all fall in line with how we're operating within within the family of our central nervous system. So let's be honest, our culture glorifies stress, work constantly, get up, keep working, don't go to sleep until friggin' 3 a.m. and keep working, right? Hustle without recovery breaks the body down, period. So your body needs breaks and recovery. And that's why people who feel the most stuck are often the ones who do everything right, clean eating, working out, taking supplements, but missing the one foundational piece, right? And I was one of those people. Just work it out, outwork it, right? You can't out supplement a nervous system that never feels safe. And that's why your body is one of the most protective things that you need to have. And so here's our 3-pillar approach to our nervous system healing. And it's something that's so pivotal and paramount to Alessi Functional Health, and how we support the nervous system healing from every single angle. So number 1, physical medicine. So the chiropractic biophysics for spinal alignment and brainstem decompression, right? That vagal toning is a big part of that, as Dr. Alessi mentioned, right? Soft wave therapy for pain relief and vagal activation. You can do this in a number of ways, but what we do with spinal injuries or where people have spinal compressions is we try to eliminate that so we can bring stem cells to activate to reduce the amount of inflammation and stress you have specifically on your spinal column, right? So that's a big thing. And then structural mobility exercises to free locked patterns. Core exercises are a big component of that. And so we do that. We have that built within our protocol, right? It's part of our pain-free future protocol where you need to be working on structural mobility exercises. It's pivotal in getting everything involved, everything activated, and just, taking your body from parasympathetic to the sympathetic and back and forth, right? Because that is part of the process. You don't want your body always to be in a parasympathetic mode. You do want sometimes it to be in sympathetic too, as well. So they go hand in hand, right? Functional medicine piece, number 2. So we remove the hidden stressors like the gut pathogens, mold toxins, and blood sugar crashes. So this is part of getting like proper blood work done. And then going through our detox protocol. I was actually talking with a guy last night and I recommended, hey, you probably should get that liver activated again, right? Because there's times where I do it on a quarterly basis. I think that you need to build that into your protocol, whether it's not maybe a monthly thing, but maybe a quarterly thing for you, or maybe it is a monthly thing for you. You need to really understand the cadence of your body and where you're at, right? Support deficiencies with adaptogens, minerals, and mitochondrial nutrients, whether it be through micronutrients, where you're getting it through supplementation or whole food sources, right? And then, as I said, use lab data to drive that precise interventions. This was me 2 years ago, where I was taken through the functional med process of really understanding my blood work and really wanting to dive in what the micronutrients were. How do I vagal tone properly so my body isn't constantly in a stress mode? And then number 3 is the regenerative tools, right? Some people are what we call too far along, right? And they need aided assistance, or they needed aided help. And, I'll be honest, I don't think anyone's not too far along. There always can be some level of help. And so the regenerative tools allow that, and specifically peptide therapy. Dr. Alessi aforementioned the Selank and the CMAX, which those are some good tools to retrain the stress response to the body. But then there's also the regenerative tools like BBC 157, SSF 31. There's other ipamorelin. There's other peptide therapies that we have within our repertoire of protocols that we've built out that are extremely helpful in the regenerative response. So another one is HRV monitoring to guide the progress along. So we all love those biofeedback tools to create that daily awareness. I think data is a big key. And then the stem cell replacement. So if you're doing it regionally or intravenous, those are some main tools that you can utilize from a regenerative standpoint that we offer at our clinic. If you need that, again, that aided recovery. So we cover the full blanket in our 3 measures. But I don't take my word for it. I'm not expecting you to. I want we always like bring in other published sources in here, right? So a 21 journal in the Journal of Clinical Medicine concluded that vagal nerve activation improves clinical outcomes in a wide range of chronic disorders, including depression, IBS, hypertension, and PTSD, by modulating inflammatory pathways, neuroplasticity, and stress response. So basically what that's saying is, like, anything you do to aid the vagal nerve activation or that vagal toning is going to improve your body's overall response for an anti-inflammatory response, right? So that is basically what it does. But I want to leave you with this thought, right? Whether you're dealing with brain fog, autoimmunity disease, anxiety, or chronic just natural fatigue that you might have, it starts with the nervous system. And when you learn to shift your body into healing mode, everything else starts to follow. So I definitely want you to just to retain that, because that's the work and that's why we do what we do.
Man, that was so good. I love the way you broke all that down with the 3 pillars as well. And, the 3 pillars really is, again, man, it's all about systems. And when you have systems dialed in, like, we get fantastic results because there's no stone unturned. We are hitting everything that someone might need to heal their body, fix their pain, dysfunction, disease, whatever it might be. So, if you want to learn more about how we help diagnose, reverse, and heal chronic disease within our functional medicine programs, go to alessifunctionalhealth.com, schedule a consultation with either me or one of our other providers, and let's create a personalized plan for that lifelong health. If you're a listener of this podcast, you're always going to get exclusive discounts and price reductions on all of our protocols, lab tests. So just be sure to mention where you heard about us.
And as always, if you found value in today's show, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. That's how we grow this message and change more lives. And then want to get in touch with us or be featured on an episode, email us at ask@alessifxhealth.com. And you can visit our website at alessifxhealth.com, sign up for our newsletter, and check out our resources page to learn more about our approach to nutrition and cutting-edge therapies.
And thank you again for tuning in to Health Decoded, where we break down the science, bust the myths, and help you take control of your health naturally. Until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember that your health is in your hands.
Thank you for tuning in to Health Decoded, where we break down the truth about all things health and empower you to take charge of your well-being. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. For more resources and personalized support, visit us at alessifunctionalhealth.com and sign up for our newsletter. To hear your questions answered live on the show, send them to ask@alessifxhealth.com. That's ask@alessifxhealth.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, your health is in your hands.